We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Mesechet Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 11b. And the previous Amud Rav Yehuda said that in a stam situation, if you have a house that's made for animals or other similar types of situations, it's potter from mezuzah, it's not chayiv in mezuzah. And the Gemara now is in the middle of quoting a brisa that seems to dispute, seems to go against what Rav Yehuda says. The brisa here continues, Beis Sharach Sadrum Arpeses. Maybe you would think a gatehouse or a portico or something similar would also be chayiv in mezuzah. Talmud Lomar Bayis. The pasuk says bayis ma bayis miyuchad ladira. Just like a bayis has to be something that's designated for living in. Yatzuelu she'en miyuchad ladira. These areas, Beis Sharach Sadrum Arpeses, they're not made for living in, so those are actually not going to be chayiv in mezuzah. Rashi says Beis Shar bayis katan she'osin lifnei shar hachotzer. This was a small house they would have in front of the gate of a chotzer. V'akol osin kapendaria and marpeses v'orich lifnei pischei aliyas harbe v'chulan olin derech sham. Similar, marpeses is like a way you go up through, almost like a porch that you're going up to the upper stories. All of these areas are ways, paths to get into the chutzner, to get into the upper houses. All those things are not miyuchad ladira, and therefore they're not going to be chayev. Achsadra is a portico. Pruzdur shalifnei batim, also kind of like a hallway entrance in front of the houses. All these areas are not chayev in a mezuzah according to the brisa. Yochol sheni marbaf beis hakisu beis habursigu beis hamerchatz ubeis hatzvila. The brisa continues. I might think to include a bathroom, a tannery, a bathhouse, a beis hatzvila, an area where you immerse. Maybe those should be chayiv in mezuzah. Talmud Lomar bayis, so the pasuk says bayis. Ma bayis so also lekavod. Just like a house has to be something honorable, afkala also lekavod, it has to be a respectable area. Yatzuelu, that excludes these kinds of areas, bathrooms and similar areas. Shein asuyin lekavod, they're not made for kavod. Yochol shani marbaf harabayis. The brisa continues. I might think to include harabayis, v'halishkos, the chambers of the Beis Hamikdash, v'hazaros, the courtyards of the Beis Hamikdash. Talmud Lomar bayis. Once again, the pasuk says bayis. Ma bayis shehuchol. Just like a house is chol, it's mundane, it's not used for holy things like the Beis Hamikdash. Af kol shu chol, so to anything which is chol, yatzu elu shein kodesh, that excludes these areas relevant to the Beis Hamikdash, which are kodesh, which are not chayiv in mezuzah. In any case, at the beginning of this price, it said clearly that the areas that are for animals, etc., are chayiv in mezuzah, which seems to be against Rav Yehuda's opinion, and therefore the Gemara says, indeed, to Yuvta, this is a refutation of Rav Yehuda's opinion. And the Gemara continues, Tani Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Kame de Rava. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda taught in front of Rava, Shisha, Shiorim, Peturim, Mina Mezuzah. There are 6 kinds of gates which are potter from Mezuzah. Beis HaTevin, the house that holds straw, Ubeis HaBakar, the house of cattle, Ubeis HaEtzim, a house for wood, Ubeis HaOtzaros, an area for storing things, Veshar HaModai, and the gates of Modai, Veshar Sheinu Mekora, and also the gates that have no roof on top of them, Veshar Sheinu Govo Ayud, if you have a gate that's not 10 tvachim high. So the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Pasacht b'shisha. You start off saying there are 6. V'salakt b'shiva. You end up saying 7. We'll take a look at Rashi over here. Rashi says first, V'shar hamodai she'osin b'kipa. What that means, it was made, it had an arch at the top. Shekein osin b'modai, that's the kind they made in Modai, so it was a gate in this kind of a formation. She'eno mekora, let's say it's a gate without a roof. Shu paretz milmal legamri, there's nothing on the top. Me'ein kisoi, there's no covering. So in all of these situations, again, we say these kinds of gates are potter from mezuzah, but the question is, you start off saying that there are 6 kinds of gates, and then you list 7 gates. So the Gemara says, Amar Lei said to him, Shar HaModai Tanoihi. When it comes to Shar HaModai, those kind of gates of an arch, that's actually a machlokas tanoim. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, kipa, if you have an archway, Rabbi Meir mechayev in mezuzah v'chachamim potrim. Rabbi Meir says it's chayev in mezuzah and the chachamim say potter. V'shavin, now they both agree, shem yesh baragla asar, that if before it starts turning into a circle at the top, it's 10 tvachim high, shechayev is b'mezuzah. In that case, it is certainly chayev in mezuzah. And Rashi over here says, first Rashi says, v'chachamim potrim, she'ein shar below rochav dalid. It's not considered a gate if it's not 4 wide. V'chol kipa miskatzeres barosh lefachos midalid. Now, if it's going to be an arch, so at the top, as it gets circular, it's going to be less than 4 wide. Vishavim, but it says Shem Yesh Baragel Yud. They both agree that if it's 10 tvachim high, Kodem Sheyaschel Eagle, before it starts to be round, I mean it goes straight up, and then only after it's 10 tvachim high, it starts to be rounded. If it's a smite rechava, then the width gets smaller. Shechayeves, then everybody agrees in that case it's chayev. She'afilu she'akol sasim miyud lamala yeshir pesach begova yud barochav dalet. Even if everything was closed off above 10 tvachim, you still have a situation of 10 high and 4 wide. So in that case, they all agree that it's chayev. And the Gemara continues. Amar Abaya. Abaya says in explaining this machlokis Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim, the kuli alma gavoa yud vein baragla gimel v'lav klumi. Everybody agrees that if this archway is 10 tvachim high, but within 3 tvachim from the ground already, it's no longer 4 tvachim wide. It's already curving to be less than 4 tvachim wide that early, that close to the ground. That's nothing. There's no way that that's chayev in mezuzah. Inami or yesh baragla gimel ve'ena gavoa yud. Let's say it's within 3 tvachim of the ground, all the way up to 3 tvachim, it is 4 tvachim wide, but it never reaches 10 tvachim high. V'lav klumi, that's also nothing. So again, looking at this picture over here, if already less than 3 tvachim up, it is less than 4 tvachim wide, that's for sure nothing. If from here to here it is not 10 tvachim high, that's for sure also nothing, is not chayiv in mezuzah. That's what Abaya is saying over here. Now, where is the machlokes? So he explains as follows. Abaya says, Lo nechliku elo begavoa yud v'yesh baragla gimel. Machlokes is if it is 10 tvachim high, and for 3 tvachim from the bottom of the ground up, it's 4 tvachim wide. V'yein barach v'dalid, but after that point, it's no longer 4 tvachim wide. V'yesh b'lochak lahashlim al arba. But in theory, you could carve out the area of the wall, and in theory, you could make it 4 tvachim wide. Rabbi Meir savar chokakin lahashlim. Rabbi Meir says we apply the rule that as if we carved it, as if it is the proper dimensions. For Rabbanan Savri ein chokakin lahashlim. The Rabbanan say we don't say that. At the end of the day, it's not 4 tvachim wide, so it's not chayiv in mezuzah. In other words, what Abai is saying is if from here to here it is 10 tvachim high, and up until 3 tvachim of the ground, it is still 4 tvachim wide. Only after that it curves inward. So that is the machlokus. So in this case, they're arguing as follows. They're saying, if you have enough space in theory that you could carve it out in this fashion, and it would be 4 tvachim wide the whole way, you have enough brick, or you have enough wall over here to do that, so then that's the machlokus, Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says it's chayiv in mezuzah because we say chokik and lahashlim, and the Chachamim say we don't say that. And the Gemara continues, Toner Rabbanan, we learned in a brayso, Beis HaKnesses, if you have a shul, or Beis HaIsha, you have a house that's designated for the person's wife, or Beis HaShutfin, you have a house that's owned by partners, Chayev is b'mezuzah, so the brayso says, all these cases are chayev in mezuzah. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Gemara says, Ma'u detema, what might you have said? Beischa, it says your house, v'lo Beisan, not her house. Beischa, your house, v'lo batayim, not a house that belongs to them, not more than one person. Kamash Malon, so the Bryce is teaching us, no, in all of these cases, it's chayiv in mezuzah. Gemara says, Ve'ema hachinami, maybe indeed we should say this drasha. Why do we include a Beis HaKnesses and a Beis HaIsha and a Beis HaShutfin? On my cross, so the Gemara says, because the pasuk says, L'man yirbu yemechem v'imei v'nechem, it says you have the mezuzah in order to lengthen your life. Hani bo chayi v'hani lo bo chayi. You think that these ones need life and those ones don't need life. Everybody needs life. Therefore, the mitzvah applies to all these cases. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, what do we do with this word Beischa? The Rava, the Gemara says it goes like Rava's drasha damar Rava, because Rava says, Derech biyascha, when you put on a mezuzah, it's the way you enter the house. When a person uproots his foot, when a person walks, he walks with his right foot first. Therefore, you put the mezuzah on the right side as you enter. The Gemara continues, Tanya Idach, we learned in another brayso, Beis HaKnesses, Beis HaShutfin, Beis HaIsha, when it comes to a shul, to a house of partners, to a house of the person's wife, Metamin, B'negoim, all of these cases can become tameh with tsaras, houses can become tameh with tsaras, and this applies to these kind of houses as well. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? So the Gemara says, Ma'hu detema, what might you have said, Uva asher lo habayis, it says, the one who he has the house. Lo v'lo love, lo v'lo lahen. It's his house, not her house. His house, not their house. Maybe you make the same drasha as we thought before. Gemara says, Kamash Malon, therefore the Brisa teaches us, no, it applies in all of these cases. So the Gemara says, V'yema hachanami. Maybe we should indeed say that it is only his house and not her house, his house and not their house. So the Gemara says, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Beveis eretz achuzazchem, in the house, in the land of your inheritance, it applies to all of your houses. So the Gemara says, Elo lo lamali, if that's the case, what is the word lo teaching us? So the Gemara says, Misha miyachid beiso lo, what it means to say is a person who designates his house only for himself, she'eino rotz lahashel kelev, let's say you have a person who's selfish, who doesn't want to lend out his kelim, v'yomer she'ein lo, he says he doesn't have what to lend, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu mefarsmo, such a person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu publicizes it, keshemefanes beso, when he has to clear out his house, he has to take out the belongings because of the tzaras, this is a way to show he really did have what to lend. Prat, and this excludes lamashal kelev lacherim, somebody who does lend his kelim to others. Such a person is not going to be punished with tzaras on his house. The Gemara continues, is it really true that a shul can become tamei with tzaras? What we learned in a brisa, the brisa says, I might have thought that shuls in Beis Medrash could be tamei with tzaras. Talmud lomar ovo asher lo habayis, pasuk says asher lo habayis, misha miyuchad lo, it's designated for him, it's private. Yatsu elu she'ein miyuchadin lo, that would exclude these places which are public places. So this brisa seems to say the exact opposite. It seems to say that a shul can get saras. So the Gemara says, Lokash, it's not difficult. Ha Rabbi Meir, ha Rabbanan. One brisa follows the position of Rabbi Meir, one follows the Rabbanan. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Beis HaKnesses, sheyesh ba beis dira lachazon HaKnesses. It says if you have a shul and there's a living quarters for the shamish of the shul, chayev b'mezuzah. Then everybody agrees that's chayev in mezuzah. V'she'ein ba beis dira, but if there's no living quarters, Rabbi Meir mechayev, Rabbi Meir says still it's chayev. V'chachamim potrin, but the chachamim say potter. That's the exact machlokus over here. You have a shul with no living quarters, a machlokus, Rabbi Meir and the chachamim, whether it can become tummy with saras. If you want, I could say another answer. Hava Rabbanan. Both brises really follow the opinion of the Rabbanan that it's potter. V'lo kasha ha de isba beis dira, ha de lesba beis dira, but it's not a kasha. The Rabbanan themselves make a distinction if it has living quarters or not. If it has living quarters, it's chayev in mezuzah. No living quarters, it's potter in mezuzah. Same with saras. If it has living quarters, it can be tamei with saras. If it doesn't have living quarters, that will not be the case. If you want, I could say another answer. Hava ha de lesba beis dira. In both cases, we're talking about a shul without living quarters, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Bey's Amud Aleph.